I am going to tell you something that most people my age are too proud or too ashamed to ever say out loud. My name is Harold. I am 84 years old, and I am telling you this story not because it is easy, but because it might be the most important thing you hear this year, maybe this decade. My wife Dorothy and I, we did everything right. Everything the book said, everything the advisors told us. We worked hard, we lived modestly, we saved and saved and saved for 35 years. We went without vacations some summers, we drove used cars, we packed lunches, we sacrificed, and by the time I was 67 years old and Dorothy was 64, we had built something we were proud of. A nest egg. A real one. Enough to last us the rest of our lives, or so we believed. Within 4 years, it was gone. Not stolen, not gambled away, not lost in some obvious disaster. Gone quietly. Gone piece by piece. Gone because of mistakes that were invisible to us at the time. Mistakes that, if I had known about them even 1 year earlier, would have changed everything. I am sitting here today in the kitchen of a much smaller house than I ever imagined I'd live in at this age, and I am telling you this story because I believe with everything I have left that someone watching this needs to hear it before it happens to them. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe it is your mother or your father. Maybe it is someone you love who is getting close to retirement and thinks they have it figured out. Nobody has it figured out. I thought I did. I was wrong. Stay with me through this whole video. I have broken this into 3 parts, because what happened to us happened in layers, and each layer taught us something devastating and important. Do not skip ahead. The piece that matters most to you might be the part you least expect. And before I go any further, if you are finding value in hearing real stories like this, real experiences from real people who have lived long enough to know what the mistakes actually look like up close, please consider subscribing to this channel. There are no gimmicks here, no actors, no scripts dressed up to look like wisdom, just people who have lived it, sharing what they learned. Hit that subscribe button, it costs you nothing, and it might one day save you everything. Let me take you back to 2009, the year Dorothy and I finally retired. I had spent 31 years as a mechanical engineer at a mid-sized manufacturing company in Ohio. Dorothy had worked 22 of those years as an office administrator at the same school district where our children went. We were not rich people. We were never rich, but we were steady, and steady, we had always believed, was enough. We had a pension, mine, from the company. We had Social Security, both of ours, though we had chosen to delay mine until 68 to get the bigger monthly amount, which our financial planner at the time had said was the smart play. We had a 401k that had taken a nasty hit in 2008, but had mostly recovered by the time we walked out the door for the last time, and we had a modest savings account, some bonds, and the paid-off house. On paper, we were in better shape than most of America. The financial planner, a man named Gerald who wore the same gray blazer every time we met and always had a pen tucked behind his ear, had run the numbers 6 ways to Sunday. He told us we were fine. He told us our assets, combined with our income streams, were more than sufficient to sustain us comfortably through our 90s. He showed us charts and projections and Monte Carlo simulations, which I did not fully understand but which looked very reassuring, printed in full color and spiral-bound. Dorothy cried when we left that last meeting with Gerald. Happy tears. The kind of tears that come after decades of discipline and worry and working towards something you were not always sure you would reach. I remember squeezing her hand in the parking lot and telling her that we had made it. That the hard part was over. I did not know it yet. But the hard part had not even started. The first year of retirement was wonderful. We took a trip to see our daughter in Portland. We fixed up the back porch we had been neglecting for 15 years. I took up woodworking. Dorothy joined a gardening club. We ate dinner together every evening at 5 o'clock and watched the news and went for walks and lived the life we had imagined. It felt earned. It felt deserved. It felt permanent. But here is the first thing nobody told us. And I want you to listen to this very carefully because it sounds so simple that you might be tempted to dismiss it. When you retire, you do not just stop working. You stop being distracted. For 35 years, my brain had been focused on work, on deadlines, on problems to solve, on colleagues to manage, and clients to satisfy. Retirement emptied all of that out. And into that empty space came something I was not prepared for. Time to think, time to talk, time to plan, and unfortunately, time to be talked to. It started with a phone call, a very friendly young man who said he had been referred to us by a mutual acquaintance, though he could never quite name who. He said he was an investment consultant and that he had been helping a number of retirees in our area substantially grow their retirement income through some specialized vehicles that were particularly suited to people in our situation. I told him we were happy with Gerald. He called back 2 weeks later, then a third time. He was never pushy. He was patient and warm, and he seemed genuinely interested in our well-being. He sent us a brochure that was very polished and professional. He invited us to a free dinner seminar at a local hotel. And I want to pause here for a moment because if there are any words in the English language that should make every retiree stand up straight and hold their wallet tighter, it is the words free dinner seminar. We went anyway. Of course we went. It was a Tuesday, and we had nothing else on the calendar. The room was full of people our age. The food was good. The presenter was polished and confident, and spoke in a way that made you feel like you were finally hearing the truth that everyone else had been keeping from you. He talked about equity-indexed annuities. He talked about guaranteed returns and protection from market downturns and legacy planning and leaving money for your children and grandchildren. He did not talk about surrender charges. He did not talk about the fine print. He did not talk about what happens when you need your money before the contract says you can have it. Over the next several months, through a series of follow-up meetings that felt more like conversations between friends than sales presentations, Dorothy and I moved a significant portion of our retirement savings into products that this man recommended. Products we did not fully understand. Products that Gerald, when we finally mentioned them to him, went quiet about in a way that should have alarmed me, but that I interpreted at the time as professional jealousy. That was mistake number one. Not the product itself, though the product was bad for us. The mistake was this. We confused familiarity with trust. That young man had become familiar to us. He had eaten dinner with us. He had asked about our grandchildren. He knew Dorothy's name. And somewhere in our minds, familiar had become the same thing as trustworthy. It is one of the oldest tricks in the world, and it works especially well on people who are kind and who want to believe in the goodness of others. We are kind people. We always have been. And in retirement, without the protective armor of a busy schedule and workplace skepticism, that kindness became a door that people walked right through. By the end of our second year of retirement, a quarter of our liquid savings was locked inside products we could not easily access without paying penalties that would have made you sick to your stomach. We did not know this yet. We would not fully understand it for another 18 months, when Dorothy's health changed everything. But I am getting ahead of myself. There was something else happening in that first chapter of our retirement. Something quieter, something more insidious, something that had nothing to do with the man in the polished suit and everything to do with us. We started spending more, not recklessly, not wildly, nothing that would have looked alarming on a bank statement to an outside observer. Just more. A nicer car than we needed. A kitchen renovation we had been putting off for years. Helping our son with a down payment on a house. A cruise for our 45th anniversary. All things that felt reasonable in isolation. All things that felt like rewards for a lifetime of discipline. All things that Gerald's projections had technically accounted for. Though Gerald's projections had assumed a spending pattern that was based on our working years. Not on the reality of what it actually feels like to finally have time and the temptation that comes with it. I have spoken with hundreds of people in my years since then, at senior centers, at church, at the coffee shop where a group of us old men gather on Friday mornings, and what I have found is that this is almost universal. The first 2 years of retirement, people spend more than they planned. not because they are irresponsible, because they are human, because decades of deferred living have a way of asserting themselves the moment the paycheck stops. We were not irresponsible. We were human, and being human, in retirement, without the right guardrails and the right knowledge, can cost you everything. By the end of 2011, 2 years into retirement, we had spent more than projected, invested a chunk of our savings into products that were not right for us, and we still believed, genuinely believed, that we were fine. The numbers still looked okay. The remaining accounts still had money in them. Gerald still sent us his quarterly newsletters with the encouraging graphs. What we did not see, what we could not see, was what was coming next. In the spring of 2012, Dorothy started having headaches. At first, we thought they were tension headaches. She had always been a worrier, a wonderful, warm, deeply caring woman who carried the weight of everyone she loved on her shoulders. The headaches seemed like a natural extension of that. We got her some better pillows. She started doing yoga with a neighbor on Saturday mornings. By June, the headaches were different. By July, we were at a neurologist's office. By August, we had a diagnosis that I will not say out loud even now without feeling the floor shift beneath me. Dorothy had a slow-growing brain tumor. Not immediately life-threatening, the doctors were careful to say, treatable, manageable, watchable, but requiring ongoing monitoring, medication, and in time, surgery. We had Medicare. We had a supplemental plan, a decent one, or so we thought. We were not uninsured. We were not naive about healthcare costs in the abstract. But nothing in the abstract prepares you for the reality. In the first year after Dorothy's diagnosis, our out-of-pocket medical costs, co-pays, uncovered medications, a specialist we had to see out of network because the in-network one had a 6-month wait, travel expenses for treatment appointments, home medical equipment, came to just over $19,000. The year after that, with a surgery and recovery, it was closer to $31,000. Gerald's projections had included a healthcare cost estimate. It was $8,000 per year for both of us combined. $8,000. An amount that, in the reality of serious illness, would not have gotten us through February. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because the single most catastrophic gap in almost every retirement plan I have ever seen, in my own, in those of the people I have spoken with, in the stories that come into this community every week, is healthcare. Not because people do not know healthcare is expensive, but because we plan for healthcare costs the way we plan for rain. We know it might come. We bring an umbrella. What we do not plan for is a flood. A serious illness in retirement is a flood. And it will destroy the carefully constructed financial landscape of your retirement years with a speed and thoroughness that is genuinely shocking until you have experienced it. Now, remember those annuity products that the friendly young man had sold us. Remember that money, sitting there locked up behind surrender charges. When we needed to access those funds to cover Dorothy's medical bills, we discovered the full cost of what we had agreed to. To get our money back, our own money, the money Dorothy and I had saved over decades of working, we would have had to pay surrender charges of nearly 18%. 18%. On top of the income taxes we would owe. We paid the charges. We had no choice. Dorothy needed care. No amount of money was going to stop me from giving her that care. But I want you to feel, for just a moment, what it feels like to watch a chunk of your life savings evaporate not because of a bad investment or a market crash or a scam, but because of the fine print in a document you signed at a hotel dinner when a charming young man smiled at you and called you by your first name. That is a specific kind of loss. It carries a specific kind of grief. But the medical costs and the annuity penalties were not the whole story of what Chapter 2 cost us. Because at the same time that Dorothy was sick and we were navigating the healthcare system and paying the surrender charges, something else was happening to our retirement income that we did not fully understand until it was too late to respond to it effectively. Inflation. Now you are probably thinking, inflation is obvious, Harold. Everyone knows about inflation. Yes. Everyone knows about inflation the way everyone knows that cars need oil changes, but knowing something in the abstract and actually accounting for it precisely in your retirement income plan are two completely different things. When Gerald ran his projections back in 2009, he had used a standard inflation assumption of 2 to 3% per year. Reasonable, historical average, smart even. What his model did not fully capture, what most retirement models do not fully capture, is the way inflation hits retirees differently than it hits working people. Retirees spend a disproportionate share of their income on healthcare and housing. Healthcare inflation runs significantly higher than general inflation. It always has. In the years Dorothy was sick, healthcare costs were rising at 5, 6, 7% annually in some categories. Meanwhile, our pension, the reliable, steady, comforting pension that I had been so proud of, had a cost of living adjustment cap of 1.5% per year. 1.5% against 6% healthcare inflation. Every year, in real terms, that pension bought us less. Our Social Security had its COLA adjustments too, but even those, in the years of low official inflation, were small and slow. We were running uphill on a treadmill that was gradually speeding up, while our legs were slowly getting tired. By 2014, 5 years into retirement, the financial picture looked very different from the one Gerald had shown us in his spiral-bound presentation. We had paid 2 years of elevated medical costs. We had paid surrender charges to access our own locked-up money. We had lived our first 2 years of retirement at a spending rate slightly above projection. Our investment accounts had recovered from 2008, but were now being drawn on at a higher rate than planned. And the income streams that were supposed to sustain us, pension, Social Security, bond interest, were buying less and less each year in real terms. At this point, a truly proactive financial advisor, someone who was actually watching our situation rather than just sending quarterly newsletters, might have flagged that we were on a trajectory that needed intervention, a recalibration, a conversation, something. Gerald did not flag it. I do not know whether he did not see it or did not think it was his place to say it or was simply not paying close enough attention. I have made my peace with Gerald. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had set up a plan and then largely left us to live inside it, which is what most financial advisors do, and which is deeply inadequate for the reality of what retirement actually looks like over time. The retirement plan is not a set-it-and-forget-it document. It is a living thing. It has to be revisited and revised as life changes, and life, I assure you, will change. Life changes in the direction of your fears more often than it changes in the direction of your hopes. That is not pessimism. That is experience. And underneath all of this, underneath the medical costs and the locked-up annuities and the inflation gap and the passive financial advisor, was something that I have only recently been able to name clearly, because it took me years to see it without the fog of pride and regret obscuring it. We were not actually in control of our financial life in retirement. We thought we were. We thought the plan Gerald had made was the thing in control, and that our job was simply to live inside it. We had outsourced our financial thinking to a document and to a man in a gray blazer who we saw 4 times a year, and we had not truly educated ourselves about what was happening to our money, or why, or what warning signs to look for. We were not stupid people. I was an engineer. Dorothy had managed a school district's administrative budget for years, but personal finance in retirement is a different subject than the things we were educated in, and we had never truly studied it. We had relied on professionals the way you rely on a doctor for a medical problem, which works fine for routine care, but which can fail catastrophically when the illness is complex and the doctor is not paying close enough attention. By 2015, Dorothy was in remission. Thank God. The woman I love was still with me, and that mattered more than any number in any account. But our financial accounts told a story that was becoming harder and harder to look at without feeling ill. In 2015, I sat down alone at the kitchen table one evening while Dorothy was sleeping, and I did something I had been avoiding for months. I added everything up. The actual, honest, No projections, no charts, no reassuring spiral-bound presentation number. What we had, what we were spending, how long it would last at our current rate. I wrote it all out by hand on a yellow legal pad, the way I used to work out engineering problems, and I sat there for a long time looking at what I had written. What I saw was that we had, at our current spending rate and with our current income streams, somewhere between 3 and 5 years of financial runway left. After that, we would be living on Social Security and my pension alone, and those two things together, after taxes, came to less than $3,000 a month. In Ohio, in 2015, in the house we owned, with the lifestyle we had built, that was not enough. I am going to tell you what happened in the 3 years after that evening, and I want you to understand that I am not telling you this for sympathy. I have had a good life. I have had a long marriage to a remarkable woman. I have children who love me and grandchildren who make me laugh. I am sitting here at 84 years old, still thinking clearly, still able to speak, still able to be of use to someone. I am not a tragic figure. But what happened to our finances in those final years before the money ran out is important, and you need to hear it. The first thing that happened was that we tried to fix it. And fixing it, at that stage, led us to make our worst mistake of all. When you are in your early 70s, and you realize that your retirement savings are draining faster than anticipated, and you are frightened, and you start looking for solutions, you become, without realizing it, exactly the kind of person that certain predatory investment schemes are designed to find. Desperate, but not obviously so. Intelligent, but not specialized. Proud enough to not want to ask family for help. Trusting enough to believe that someone who seems knowledgeable is also honest. Through a neighbor's recommendation, a good neighbor, a genuinely well-meaning man who had made the same mistake and did not yet know it, we were introduced to a private investment fund. A real estate fund, or so it was described to us. The kind of investment that was supposedly used by wealthy families to generate stable, inflation-protected income. The kind of investment that was not available to most people, but that we were being offered because of our neighbor's relationship with the manager. We invested $60,000. Within 18 months, the fund had stopped sending monthly statements. Within 2 years, our calls were not being returned. Within 30 months, we had filed a complaint with the state securities regulator and discovered, along with several other retired couples from our area and hundreds more across 3 states, that the fund had been a fraud, a complete and total fraud. The money was gone. I am not going to spend a lot of time on the fraud itself, because the fraud, as terrible as it was, is actually not the most important lesson of Chapter 3. The most important lesson is this. We were vulnerable to that fraud because of the compounding effect of all the earlier mistakes. We were desperate enough to take a risk we never would have taken from a position of security. We were trusting enough, after years of being kind and open-hearted, to follow a neighbor's recommendation without doing independent verification. We were prideful enough to not tell our children what was happening until it was far too late for them to help. Pride. That is the one I want to sit with for a moment, because I believe it is the most universal and the most destructive of all the forces I have described today. We had spent 35 years building something to be proud of. Our retirement nest egg was not just a financial asset. It was the physical evidence of our discipline, our sacrifice, our capability as adults and providers and partners. To admit that it was in trouble, to say out loud to our children, to our friends, even to each other in direct and honest terms, felt like admitting that the pride had been misplaced, that we had not been as capable as we had believed, that the story we had told ourselves about who we were was wrong. So we did not say it out loud. We managed it privately. We made decisions under pressure, in secret, without the counsel of people who loved us and might have seen what we could not see. And that privacy, that pride, that fierce and deeply human desire to maintain the appearance of control, it cost us the last reserves we had. By 2019, the nest egg was gone. Not entirely. We still had the house, which we eventually sold and downsized from, and we still have our income streams. We are not living in poverty. We are not without dignity. But the future we had built in our minds and in Gerald's spiral-bound projections, the one where we traveled and helped our grandchildren and left something behind for the people we loved, that future did not happen. And now I want to give you something. Because this story is not just about what went wrong. It is about what I know now that I did not know then. And if I could go back and hand my 67-year-old self a piece of paper with these things written on it, this is what it would say. It would say, "Do not confuse familiarity with trustworthiness. The warmest person in the room is not necessarily your ally. Verify credentials independently. Ask for written disclosures. If someone has trouble answering the question, 'How do you make money from this?' walk away." It would say, "Your healthcare costs will be higher than your projection. Not a little higher, significantly higher. Plan for a flood, not a rainstorm. Research what a serious illness actually costs in your area before you finalize your retirement number. Then add 40%. It would say, review your financial plan every single year, not with a quarterly newsletter. Sit down with your advisor and say, show me the current trajectory. Show me what this looks like if healthcare costs rise at 6%. Show me what happens if one of us gets seriously ill in year 3. Ask the uncomfortable questions before life asks them for you.